Hi, everyone. I'm John Shaffrin. I head up some of the internal research that we do here at Artemis Connection. And in the short 10 minutes that I have with you today, I wanted to share some of the findings from the qualitative research that we've been conducting over the past year with professionals from a multitude of different industries. We're calling this Project Ascendance because we wanted to understand the strategies that people engage in throughout their education and professional careers in order to ascend past barriers that they encounter, setbacks they encounter throughout their lives. So we thought that's an aptly named title, and we went with it. But unfortunately, we're going to start with some bad news. And that would be the current situation of the corporate pipeline, as you can see behind me. We know that right now, it does not look great. It's an understatement. It looks especially bad for women and people of color, especially at the top as well. And in terms of gender, as you can see, women's attrition across the board drops off immediately, beginning at the transition into the manager position. So the first management role, going from individual contributor into management, you see a precipitous drop off of women. And this is not news for a lot of you, I'm sure. These numbers, McKinsey puts out this report every year for the last couple of years, and these have barely budged for the most part. But we do know where people are dropping out of the pipeline, but we also here at Artemis Connection wanted to kind of understand, well, if we know where people drop out, but sort of what about people that don't, right? Or what about people who experience the same sort of setbacks and bias and inequalities that these other people who didn't make it into the leadership roles experienced? How did they navigate around those? What were the patterns of actions that they undertook in order to get into leadership roles in their industries? And so in order to answer this question, we decided let's do some qualitative research. So we conducted an interview study with professionals in over 12 industries. We interviewed 225 men and women. And the sample is, I think it's very incredibly diverse. It's 52% white, 13% African American, 17% Asian American, and 18% Latino. And these are people who work in a lot of different industries. And we are essentially doing their career trajectories, but we actually started as early as their early education. So we were asking people to tell us about what were your early influences as a child? What kind of TV did you watch? I mean, Murphy Brown, man, that show did something. I don't know if you all noticed that. That was like the biggest finding in terms of media influences early on. People brought up Murphy Brown. Someone's gonna have to explain this to me later. But that one had really important influence on a lot of girls when they were young. And we talked about their educational experiences, obviously. Where did you go to school? What did you study and why? Why did you choose your major? Why that one? Were there any economic or social constraints? What was going on in your home? So that, and then of course, looking at people's professional careers. So, how did you get to where you are today? What kind of twists and turns did it take? How did that look? And so these were about an hour-long interviews. And again, we were looking at particular strategies that people used along the way when they encountered setbacks in what their planned career was originally, right? So how did they navigate around these things? And while we were asking them these questions, we tried to cover these different times in their lives, right? Their end-to-end pipeline, starting very early and all the way into their current leadership role, if they had one, if they were entrepreneurs, how did they become entrepreneurs? What was the sort of catalyst that created that interest in becoming entrepreneurs? And one actually surprising thing out of this is that there were a lot of women that we spoke to in our sample that basically being exposed to incredible bias when they're trying to transition into like mid-level manager roles made them say, I'm opting out of this, but not really opting out in the sense that they're saying, I'm going to start a company, right, that does it right, that treats people fairly. We actually talked to a lot of people like that. So what we wanted to do with these questions is get at those experiences and ask people what exactly were important moments in your career that really shaped the next step that you went into. It's like, what really helped you decide what you wanted to do next? And what we found is that there are a lot of, as you can see, a lot of visible and invisible supports and barriers that people encountered along the way. So some people had role models that pushed them and they said, I want to do what that person does. Some people took extracurricular activities and they said, this is a really cool discipline. Like, I really want to get into computer science. I don't know what you can do with it because there's no one who looks like me in it, but it's really fun and I enjoy it, right? And some people had other kinds of barriers like economic and social barriers that made them choose one major over another, made them choose one career over another, right? In terms of what kind of expected salary they would earn. And these people, when we talked with them, we wanted them to sort of tell us about these pivotal moments that I've been bringing up over and over again. So it's like, what was a moment that clicked for you where you're like, okay, this is what I want to do, and what prevented you from doing that? We wanted to look at those kinds of things. And when we did that, we started noticing that there were these particular points where, basically precarious points, right? These are points where people were likely to drop out or get forced out of the particular field that they wanted to work in. So, and we look at these different pivotal points that we've been mapping out. And obviously, some of these are not surprising for a lot of you, I'm sure. But we know that these different points, experiencing bias and inequality at all these different points in the education and professional pipeline, they compound, right? So girls who don't get exposed to or encouraged in math and science, then don't take any AP math and science courses in high school, they're much less likely to want to major in math and science majors, and so on and so forth. We know that happens, and we know that these experiences that compound each other eventually push people out and direct them into other fields. But there's really less data out there exactly about what people do to work around those particular forms of bias. So we wanted to start to track the patterns and what people are experiencing. And so what I wanted to talk about today was specifically executive championing, which is this last one on the bottom right. This was something that came up quite frequently as this really powerful thing that people told us over and over again when they were reflecting back on their careers, right? So if we asked people towards the end of the interview and we said, okay, what exactly really made a difference to you? What really helped you? And they talked about finding advocates early and often. And the people who didn't have those advocates talked about wishing that they had them early and often. So I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the things that people said about executive championing. And we've already actually shared some of the findings with you in your seat, and we'll be sharing more after the talk. But I just wanted to bring that up. So this has been mentioned earlier. Sponsorships and sponsors and champions are really important, and we've heard about this earlier with other speakers. But the important thing to remember is that these are mutual career accelerators, right? A champion will get in the driver's seat of your career with you. They will tie their fate to yours, right? So we heard of a lot of people who took risks on each other by someone senior sponsoring as a champion, someone more junior, right? Providing opportunities for them, tying their reputation to theirs. Really, really crucial for getting into leadership positions, to sort of burnishing your reputation within the organization. And what was great about this is that we noticed that when people did this, their champion relationships were very durable, right? So once you get a champion, it's very murky exactly into how you keep a champion. How do you keep these relationships going? How do you make them strong? That there's not a lot of research on. And we also wanted to say, well, how do people find champions who don't look like them, right? Because championship is such an important facilitator of diversity and inclusion in organizations, right? Because white men tend to have the best networks and the most powerful networks. And if they champion someone who doesn't look like them, they're basically loaning their proxy power within the organization to other people, right? You're saying, you get access to my network as well, and you get access to the organizational power that I have. And so we wanted to know exactly, how do people find, oftentimes like white men who are usually better positioned than other people in the organization, to be their champions, and how do those relationships get established? What are the strategies people use to keep them going? Because what was really surprising that we found is that people find these champions that look nothing like them, share no similar background experiences, share no cultural experiences, share no identity experiences, and even have completely different personalities, like they can't even share a joke. You know what I mean? And that was surprising, and it was surprising because we didn't think that you could make a relationship around that. These are usually the building blocks of what we consider a good relationship, like you have something in common. So we're excited to share those strategies with you today and after the conference. Furthermore, we also know that people find many ways to find their champions. But again, the act of keeping the champion and of developing the relationship, right? Keeping it strong, that was a lot murkier. And so we looked at the other strategies that people use to do this very thing. How do we keep my championship and protege relationship alive? What are the strategies that multiple people used over and over again that seem to work for them? And I wanted to point out that, right, when people encounter inequality, structural inequality, right, finding a champion, it's not a solution to these larger issues, but they're patterns, they're actions that work for many people, and they're ways to navigate around bias. So we're going to share those with you as well. And I only have a couple more seconds left. But I wanted to say that on your chair, there is a myth-busting guide that we created, because there are a lot of misconceptions about championship. So I wanted you to have that to take with you to start dispelling some of the myths that we have. We also have 5 other guides about championing, how to find a champion, what's the difference between a mentorship and championship, and of course, how to maintain and develop these relationships. And we're actually going to release more findings about championship and other aspects of the career pipeline that we uncover as we go along. And you can actually follow us on our website at projectascendance.com. And there will be access to download the additional guides. So if you're looking for a champion, you want to steward the next generation of diverse talent, go to the website, read the guides, and hopefully you find them useful. And reach out to us if you have questions about it, because we're learning more and more as we go through this data each and every day. And I'm going to make my exit. Thank you very much.